This is the IDP After Show.
Welcome to the IDP After Show. I am your host, Jeff Pomazal. In this episode of the IDP After Show, we're going to be continuing our IDP Battle Royale series for 2024. To help me break down tonight's divisions, I am humbled to be talking to the cornerback connoisseur himself, Mr. Cornerback himself, Johny the Greek. Johnny, how are you doing today?
Hey, Jeff. Good. How are you? How's your off season going?
Good. Busy time this year. There is no off season. You know that.
That's true. That is true. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure for sure. So, tonight we're going to be continuing our IDP Battle Royale series. And if you're new to the concept, my guest and I will be pitting one AFC division foe against their NFC counterpart. We'll be starting the lineup that will consist of 2 defensive tackles, 2 defensive ends, 3 linebackers, 2 cornerbacks, 2 safeties, and 1 flex position. We'll be awarding points for a win at each positional group at the end of the show and crowning our overall divisional winner by the end. In this episode, we'll be looking at the AFC and NFC East division. So players currently from the Patriots, the Bills, Dolphins, and Jets will be going up against a squad of current players from the Giants, Eagles, Commanders, and the Cowboys. With that said, Johnny, are you ready to get this party started?
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
All right. And just so Johnny is not going to hammer us all with just Cowboy players. So he promised that he wouldn't do that. So, all right, let's take a look first at the AFC East. So who are our defensive tacklers representing?
Yeah, so we were talking about this before we kicked off, and this one seemed pretty straightforward and easy. Defensive tackle 1, AFC East, despite a down year a little bit last year, would still be Quinnen Williams in my eyes. We've seen a 12-sack, 55-plus tackle season in very recent history. That is one heck of a ceiling right there. This is an incredible pass rush to begin with. They got Haason Reddick in the offseason. I would tend to think that means fewer double teams for Quinnen, and he's awesome to begin with. I see a bounce back season for Quinnen, so I'm taking him as the DT1 for AFC East.
Yeah, and I just think the whole narrative about a healthy Rodgers makes that team so much better and more competitive. And, you had to realize or had to think, when they were like week 4, week 5, and they were losing games and things like that, the whole morale of that locker room was pretty down, pretty low. They knew they weren't probably going to be the team that they were expecting to be. And if Rodgers can stay healthy, that whole team just improves. And I think that helps not only the offensive, obviously, but I think in this case, the defensive part of it too. So couldn't agree more with that. Who are you thinking for our second defensive tackle representing AFC here, Johnny?
Yeah, so this one might be considered a little more iffy, but I'm sold. I'm sold after I saw last year and in recent seasons with Zach Sealer as our defensive tackle too from the Dolphins here. He will not have Christian Wilkins next to him, so that may or may not impact things. I'm not too worried about that, though, because the last 3 seasons have been 62 combined tackles, 70 and 63. So we've got a great floor for combined tackles, and he's coming off a 10-sack season. The Dolphins believe in him to be their DT1 for the next God knows how long. He just signed that contract. So I'm feeling pretty good about it. I'm going to go Zach Sealer, DT2.
Yeah, I'm with you, too. And I think this is going to be a volume play here. Just like you said, they're going to be without not only Wilkinson, but they're going to probably be without Chubb and without Phillips for a little bit of time too. So he's maybe just a smash volume play where he's just going to get a ton of play and a lot of volume because he's really might be one of the few defensive linemen they had there to start the season. So couldn't agree more with you. So as we move into the defensive ends, now we've got some, like you maybe already teased out a little bit with Haason Reddick moving over from the Eagles now over here to the Jets, so he might make an appearance here. So who are defensive ends that you have representing AFC East?
Yeah, and just for the record, these could easily be flipped. I can't predict the future, but I would say Matt Judon as my 1. It could easily be Reddick, though. Reddick's been more consistent. I just like the ceiling of Judon. We've seen a 15.5 sack season recently, 12.5 sacks. In fact, his last 2 healthy seasons were 15.5 and 12.5 sacks. That's excellent. If he can avoid further injury, he's a sure thing for double-digit sacks. He plays a ton. We always like to see that. But yeah, I have no problem if you wanted to say Reddick 1, Judon 2. So I guess I'll let the cat out of the bag. Reddick's going to be my 2 here.
And I don't think anybody would say any ill on that either, but just because these are clearly the two most dominant players right now. And like we already kind of teased out with the Dolphins not having Phillips or Chubb to start, those two names could easily be here at the defensive end position, but we don't know when they'll be on the field or when they'll be up at game speed. Their injuries happen so late in the season. Judon did get hurt obviously too, but his was like week 4 or week 5. So he's had a much longer timetable to get healthy, get back on the field, things like that. The only hesitation I have with Judon is all of the trade rumors. Like, is he going to get traded? Is this new regime of the Patriots going to keep him on? We've heard names like maybe the Ravens might be looking at him, things like that. So, as we record this in the early part of June, maybe July, August rolls around. It might be very different, but as of today, Judon would definitely have to be one of those guys representing the AFC East, at least for me, and it sounds like for you as well. So
yeah, I'm with you on that. And dynasty is a different thing. Like Phillips, Chubb, the future, sure, but we're concentrating on this upcoming season. So
if you're not on the field, you can't be scoring points. So
yes, sir.
All right. Next thing here we're going to be looking at is the linebacker position, and probably the first two are probably slam dunk layups. But we get to that third one, and it might be kind of a little more of a kind of up to interpretation how you're feeling about certain players going into years. You had a lot of players last year being injured at the linebacker position. We saw some players kind of establish themselves coming out of, not saying nowhere, but we definitely had some players that kind of like rose with the opportunity they were given. So, Johnny, who do you have as our linebackers here for the AFC?
Yeah, so I think the LB1's pretty set in stone. It's going to be CJ Mosley for me. So this guy is the definition of consistency. Him or like Fred Warner. If I can get either of those guys as my LB1, I am more than happy because I know I'm getting, with CJ Mosley at least, 150 plus combined tackles the last 3 seasons in a row. And he has not missed a meaningful game since 2019. And if I remember correctly, that was a COVID opt-out that year. So he hasn't really missed a game since 2018. He's had 100 plus combined tackles in 7 of 9 seasons total in the entire league. So, that is just awesome consistency, and consistency is king. So give me CJ Mosley at LB1, and I'll take his running mate Quincy Williams at LB2, who has had 100 plus combined tackles the last 3 seasons in a row, has finally solidified himself as the other starter next to Mosley. A couple of years ago, that was a problem, but not anymore. The AFC East in general is a bit linebacker weak with either injuries going on with like Milano and the Bills and, that whole unsettled situation, or Miami, where we don't know if it's going to be Brooks or someone else, or New England, where we don't know if it's going to be Tavai or Juwan Bentley. Who knows, right? I'll take the solidity or the how solid it is with Quincy Williams. We know he's going to be a good option this year. So that's my LB2.
I couldn't agree more with the first 2 calls here. Again, I think, we kind of teased it out a little bit too when we talked about Quinton Williams. That whole defense is just going to take a step forward. They're a scary good defense. So if you play in a team defensive league, they're definitely a team to be targeting this year. Again, a healthy Rodgers makes that team really scary. They're going to put up some points. And as we know, if your offense is scoring points, the opposing team has to push the ball down the field, and that gives your defensive line time to get sacks. That gives your secondary chances for interceptions. It just really improves the stock of that whole team. So couldn't agree with number 1 and number 2. Curious, who do you have as your number 3 linebacker for the AFC?
Real answer, no idea. but my guess was Juwan Bentley. But I've read things in the offseason saying this could be Jelani Tavai, who actually had a better PFF grade, if I recall correctly.
Yes.
So who knows, right? But what I do know is Juwan Bentley has had 100 plus combined tackles the last 3 seasons in a row. His playing time used to fluctuate, but that was under Belichick. We're going to have a new look Patriots team across the board this year, right? And maybe, just maybe, for the first time in 20 plus years, we'll have a defense that doesn't change every week, and we can actually predict things from it. So that'd be nice.
It's been the running joke, like with the Patriots running backs, you never draft a Patriots running back because you don't know who it's going to be that week. Same could be said almost for their linebacker core over the last couple of years too. It's every week it's been this revolving door, and it's just and I think like you said too, like with this new regime coming in, it might add some solidity to it where we don't have the guessing game. And so, as an LB3, if you're taking your shot here, like you could do worse. So the only guy that we were kind of mentioning that might be a flip-flop is probably Jordan Brooks now that he's in Miami. He did very well with a few games when he was the standalone guy in Seattle when Wagner was out. I don't see another linebacker in Miami kind of competing with Brooks now. We saw Jerome Baker leave Miami to ironically go to Seattle. So Brooks definitely could have a great standout season. I know from a PFF standpoint, he's probably not the most efficient linebacker to own, but if we're thinking about this from a fantasy football perspective, you just got to be on the field making tackles, and Brooks could be definitely a compiler there in South Beach. So.
Right. And it's important to remember now, June 7th, that we're all in the same boat. We have no idea what's going to happen this season. What we're doing now is just taking our shots, taking our guesses, hoping we're right. But none of this is going to matter by week 7 when we're scrambling to replace 40 injured players and we're pulling guys off waivers that no one's ever heard of before, right? So, do your best research now, make your best guesses now, but don't worry about it. You'll be able to adjust when the season comes around.
Not quite flag plant season yet. Well, that'll be later in the season. We're going to get to that. So you don't have to get there. All right. So, speaking of flag plants, this is kind of your wheelhouse. So I'm going to put you on the spot here. So who are the cornerbacks we want to be drafting from the AFC? So this might be a flag plant alert here. So
I love the AFC East corners. They got some great options. A lot of people would say Sauce, but teams don't like to throw at Sauce because he's really good. I like DJ Reed instead. He kind of has the lesser of all evils effect, is what I call it. He's the safest guy to throw at if you're an opposing quarterback. And that shows in his stats: 76, 80, and 78 combined tackles last 3 seasons. Anything over like 60 for a corner should, perk your ears up a little bit. And he's got great tackle numbers. And that's with missing 4 or 5 games due to injury. So the Sauce effect is a real thing. They don't want to target him, so they end up targeting some of the other corners a little bit more often. And he also has double-digit pass defense in 2 of the last 3 seasons as well. For a lot of us that play in big 3 scoring or kind of splash play, big play scoring, whatever you want to call it, those pass defenses are huge. They're worth like 4 points in most of my leagues. That's awesome. That's most of a touchdown right there. So yeah, lots of pass defenses, lots of combined tackles, good consistency from a cornerback. That's pretty much unheard of. So I love DJ Reed.
Are there, and this is going to be a little off tangent, a little off script here, Johnny. So the Sauce effect, we've got DJ Reed playing opposite of him. We liked that as a player because he's going to be targeted because teams are going to avoid Sauce. Are there other players, other teams that have that same type of like tandem or duo that they have the superstar opposite? So you should be targeting those players. Do you have any names for us just to kind of...
Oh yeah, absolutely. Miami, Jalen Ramsey. Kader Kohu is probably going to be really good this year, although they also got I believe they got Kendall Fuller in the offseason too, who's always been productive and always been very good as an IDP cornerback. So one of those guys is going to end up being awesome because I don't know if anyone, had shares of Jalen Ramsey last year, but I did. I had quite a few, and I'll tell you how it went. Not well. He had like 2 picks his first game and then didn't do anything the rest of the year because people stopped throwing at him.
Scared everyone off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is there one more name can you throw off our listeners?
Yep. No worries. And then CB2, little bit of a guess here, but a good guess, I think, Christian Gonzalez. So we did see him play 100% of snaps as a rookie for Bill Belichick. That should tell you everything you need to know right there. Belichick does not start rookies and play them 100% of snaps ever. This guy had an average of 4 combined tackles and 1 pass defense per game before he was injured last season. That's a really good floor right there. And he had a few spike weeks he gave us before that injury, including a pick and a sack within 4 games. That's a great floor to begin with. Plus, we're going to see those crazy splash plays. That one of the greatest defensive minds on the planet drafted him and started him as a rookie when he's really never done that before. I think we just listened to what, Belichick was saying, and we definitely saw flashes of it last year too.
Are you worried about Gonzalez being too good and not getting targeted because of who's playing opposite of him? Is there any chance of that happening?
Yeah, I mean that's always a possibility. That's the weird thing about corners, right? Like we want them to be good enough, like PFF wise and job wise, to keep their job, so that we don't, have a random benching out of left field that leaves us with 0 points, which happens all the time in cornerback land. So we don't want that to happen, but we don't want them to be too good either, because then no one's going to throw at them. So we're looking for mediocre, and Gonzalez may be better than mediocre. I just don't think it's going to happen right away. That's maybe like a year 3, year 4 thing. I think we get good production this year out of him.
And especially coming back from injury too, they're probably not going to be, they're going to test the waters. He's basically still going to be on his rookie year till about week 7 or 8 this year. So he's still going to have a lot of stuff to learn. So, all right, getting into the safety position for the AFC. Who do you have as our safeties?
Yeah, so a couple really solid options here. First one would be Kyle Duggar, Patriots. So he's coming off of 109 combined tackles last season, which is excellent. For me, anything over like 80, 85 is noteworthy in my book, and he went way past that. He had 78 and 92 combined tackles the 2 seasons prior. So we're floating in that good area. It used to be that playing time was his biggest issue. That's not a concern anymore. He's been at or close to 100% of snaps all of last season, and he's a key cog in this defense going forward. So I have no concerns about playing time, and the production's been there regardless.
I know he's got kind of dual eligibility on sleeper because we've been doing some best ball drafts, and he's got that linebacker / defensive back, and so maybe he's that sneaky piece. That's why Jelani Tavai, or he might be that hybrid kind of player where he kind of limits Tavai's snaps because Duggar's going to play that more in the box kind of safety role. So kind of a sneaky cheat code there too. And I love your second call here on the second safety in for the AFC.
Yeah, Javon Holland. Love this guy. I have what are those memories called that are like imprinted in your brain forever? I guess that's it. It's an imprinted memory of Javon Holland from last year. Yeah, set in stone, right? Around Christmas time, that game against the Dolphins, where he returned a 101-yard interception to the house right before halftime. That ended up winning me a ton of cash on FanDuel. And I've loved him before that, and I love him even more now. This guy is just awesome. You're getting a great floor with 74, 96, and 69 combined tackles for his first 3 seasons. That's with games missed, right? So we got to extrapolate that out. We're looking at 69 combined tackles, missed a few games. That's 80 something normally, right? So we got the floor, and we've got the splash plays. 4 sacks, 5 picks, and a touchdown through his first 3 seasons, with all those games missed as well. So injuries could be an issue here, but if we get good health out of him, he was on pace for a 90 combined tackle season last year before that injury. I just love having a good floor and then having an opportunity for like week winning plays as well, week in and week out. And that's what Holland gives you.
I think we have the same memory of Holland. Actually, unfortunately, I was playing against Holland that week, and he ended up, so you have different memories than I do, and that's okay, I guess. But my therapist and I were working through it, but that's okay. Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how Holland does this year because Miami's defense is so decimated. I think that, that the defensive line, which you've already talked about, is really banged up right now. That linebacker room is, very different than it was for years past. Baker has been there for 5 seasons, and now he's moved on. It'll just be interesting to see his role on the defense, which could definitely help him, to create more opportunities, because he might be one of the only playmakers outside of the corners in Miami to step up. So it'll just be interesting to kind of see how opportunity plays out this season for Holland. So I love that, especially as your safety too. That's an awesome spot to get him there. So, all right. So moving on to our last position for the AFC, we have this flex spot, and we've mentioned a lot of names right now already as far as like players we're on the fence on. It could be if we had one more position, who our LB3 might be. So who do you have, Johny, right now as our IDP flex for the AFC?
Honestly, no one great. Nothing stuck out immediately. So I went with the Bills, and I said Terrell Bernard or Dorian Williams. I know Milano will be back, but he is made of glass. So for how long, right? And he's good, but what we saw out of that position with Bernard last year was 143 combined tackles in a guy that did not start the entire season. If we get enough opportunity for one of these guys, I think we could have an excellent IDP flex option here. But I'd love to hear your take on this.
I'm with you too. And as you were kind of talking about players in new homes and things like that, Dorian Williams had an opportunity and didn't really seize it last season. Terrell Dodson was there. He didn't really grasp onto it, so kind of those two players, maybe Milano steps in and takes those snaps and stats, and that leaves Bernard to do what he did last season. So I don't see a cliff necessarily for Bernard. If anything, there might be like a slight dip in production, but still he finished as the top 10 linebacker last season. And if he returns, dropping from LB 6 or 7, whatever he finished to like LB 12 or 13, I don't think any manager is going to be upset with that type of production. So, and especially where you're going to be taking or drafting Bernard right now, you don't have to take him as an LB1. He definitely has that LB2, LB3 ADP right now, and he's got LB1 upside. So that's, as a flex, that's pretty good, especially in the AFC, because the linebackers in the AFC East are definitely not anything to write home about. So
yeah, I'm with you. Slim pickings.
Yeah. Anything that stood out to you, Johny, too, as far as like AFC East players, or there a team that stood out to you, or anything that just kind of put a ribbon on that before we move on to the NFC?
Yeah, the Jets stood out. So while the Cowboys are talking about being all in, the Jets are actually all in. They have pushed all their chips in. It's now or never. The Reddick signing, bringing in Chuck Clark from Baltimore, another year of experience for Jermaine Johnson and McDonald. These guys are absolutely loaded on their pass rush and their defensive line across the board. They've got Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed at cornerback, and Michael Carter ain't bad either. And their safeties were okay, not great, and they improved on that. Like, that is a scary, scary good defense. And if Rodgers is even just okay and gets them out in front a little bit, that forces the opposing team to be one-dimensional, and then that defense really kills them. So I think the Jets are locked and loaded.
How close was Jermaine Johnson to making the defensive end spot? Is it just because of like him and Reddick both playing the same position on the same team, cannibalizing each other? You just want obviously Reddick is the higher ceiling. Yep. Jermaine Johnson has the potential and the flashes, just not consistently. He's definitely in that conversation of being there. How close was that of a call for you?
Oh yeah, no, he definitely came to mind. So did Jalen Phillips and Chubb and Greg Russo even a little bit. But yeah, I mean, we've just seen it out of Reddick legitimately for 4 years in a row now. Yep. That's just been incredible. So I'll go with that.
All right. Well, we were even talking about the AFC, and you found a way to get the Cowboy conversation in there. So I'm proud of you for waiting until like the last segment to do that. So, all right. Well, let's not hold the readers or listeners in suspense anymore. Let's talk about your AFC East, the Cowboys. And I promise they are not all Cowboys. So there are a few, but let's kick it off here with the defensive tackle position. Who you have representing our AFC East all-star team?
Oh yeah, NFC East. Yep, I got you.
Oh, sorry, NFC. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, DT1, we were both in agreement on this. DT2 is where it gets weird, but DT1 I think has to be Jonathan Allen. So he's had 60 plus combined tackles in 7 of 9 total season at defensive tackle. That's insane. And when that was a 16-game season, that's 5 combined tackles a game. I used to have the math in my head. So it's a little bit less now, but that's still a great floor. You're getting essentially 4 combined tackles every time Jonathan Allen shows up and plays a game. Plus, we know this guy has 5+ sacks in 7 of 9 seasons so far as well. So you're getting a good amount of sacks. We've seen double-digit sacks. He's just a good, consistent, solid defensive tackle. And that has been hard to find in the past, but we're just like really lucky with how many good defensive tackles there are currently.
Yeah, I think the strength of the NFC is probably along the defensive front versus like the secondary for the AFC was definitely the strong point there. But I agree, like you're not going to find a more consistent player than Allen. And I even think with the trades that Washington has made, I still think he's going to show up and play. He's definitely going to be called upon. Maybe a lot like Zeiler is for Miami. He's going to have to be the guy. So love that call. We've got the high floor. We've got the consistency there. There's no reason not to have him there. So you mentioned it got a little weird at number 2. So who do you think in here at number 2?
Yeah, so I mean, I've always loved Daron Payne, and I put him in here, but he is coming off a down year, and this could easily be Dexter Lawrence here, right? Like he's just as good, if not better. But we've seen an 11 sack, 64 combined tackle season in recent history from Daron Payne. However, that was on the older Washington defensive line when it was still stacked. That's really not the case anymore. So upon further review, I'm going to change my answer and go Dexter Lawrence here.
Well, I'm glad you turned to the dark side. I just love the Dexter Lawrence for this season. He graded out efficiently, super efficient last season. He finished out as the defensive tackle 1 according to PFF. He had a great season with 45 hurries, 14 hits, 6 sacks to go along with 49 tackles, which is outstanding to get from your defensive tackle position. And this year, I think that defensive front for the Giants has only improved. Thibodeau's one more year into his development. He promised that he was going to break Strahan's sack record. They also signed Brian Burns. So I just think that whole unit has gotten better, and maybe less focus will be put on Lawrence now that Burns is there, so he can keep doing what he's doing. He's a massive dude, and he's clogging up the middle. And I just think that whole unit is probably a little bit more efficient. And like you mentioned, that Washington Commanders team is not the same team that it was before. And if I'm rolling out a tandem or a duo here, I'm probably not going to take 2 Commanders as my defensive tackles. I'm probably going to get a little diversify here a little bit, and a good pivot definitely in Dexter Lawrence. So,
yep.
All right. Moving on to the defensive ends, and I don't think there's a lot of conversation to be had here, but Johnny, who do you guys your defensive 1 and defensive end 2 here?
I mean, Mike is obviously defensive end 1, but the weird thing is we've only seen 13 and a half sacks is the ceiling so far. I don't know, fellas. I don't know. It's not TJ Watt numbers. It's not Nick Bosa numbers. It's not even Hassan Reddick a couple of years ago numbers, right? Mike is great, but I don't know if he's the DE1. I don't know about that. But yes, he's the best defensive end in the NFC East, no doubt. 13 plus sacks every season to this point. Great floor, year in, year out. Playmaker. They just do some weird stuff with him, and they're in a bit of a contract battle right now. And they're nickel and diming, and they're doing Dallas things like saying that he's a linebacker, not a defensive end, so they can save $3 million a year and stuff. So they're pissing him off essentially. And I don't think that's going to go well. I think we'll get the 13 sacks out of him this year, but I don't think it's going to be a career year, not with the way they're treating him.
Do you feel at all nervous now that Dan Quinn is gone?
Yeah.
And was he putting the pieces in the right position to do well, or was it the players performing well? That Dallas defense unit is filled with a lot of IDP playmakers, and from a fantasy perspective, is that the defensive coordinator doing those things to make those players successful? Or is that, obviously the players are talented to do that too, but can someone else come in and do what Dan Quinn did to get the production out of those players? So
no, I don't think so. You're already seeing stories out of Dallas about Parsons and the new defensive coordinator. Not coming to my brain right now, basketball season. But they're not agreeing on things already. I was listening to that on NFL radio on the way into work this morning. So that's not good. You know what I mean? Like, you guys got to be on the same page. And it's obviously a downgrade going from Quinn to legitimately anyone else except like Dick LeBeau or someone.
Sure. And Quinn seemed like a very player's coach. Like, the players rallied around him, they played for him, and that's tough, if that's all the player has known, to play for a Quinn, and all of a sudden this next guy comes in and it's not the same, the language is different, and it's the message isn't felt. that's a real thing. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Parsons on that defensive unit this year.
Yeah. I mean, he's still going to be great. I just don't know about the price for production. You know what I mean? Because he's one of those, like him, TJ Watt, Crosby now. You have to go rounds, plural, earlier than everyone else to get these guys. Like I'm in a startup right now, and we're picking, like RB1 and wide receiver 2s. And I've got guys, out there picking Parsons and TJ Watt. Like that's how early you have to go to get them. And I'm not willing to sacrifice my offense or the rest of my team just to have like a little bit prettier piece at my DE1.
Yep. Yeah, the turnover on the defensive side is too great, especially early startup like that, to be drafting IDP players, especially when you don't even have your offensive units filled out yet. So totally agree with you.
Yep.
Well, getting back to the defensive part of the ball here, let's go to our defensive end 2 for the NFC East. And who do you have here?
Yeah, this one's definitely a bit of a guess. So the Eagles got some guys that could do it. Josh Sweat, maybe. Kayvon Thibodeau could certainly do it. However, I'm going to go with Brian Burns. So Brian Burns joins a loaded defensive line that's already got Thibodeau, already got Dexter Lawrence, and now even has Jordan Phillips, who's coming off a pretty good season for him. So I would expect far fewer double teams than he saw in Carolina, where he was the focus, and that was it. He was the focus.
Mm-hmm.
So now he's just another cog in the pass rush machine in New York, and I expect him to beat out his average, which is just about 10 sacks a season and 50 plus combined tackles.
Yeah, he was one of those players that like everyone was expecting to get traded. I don't think the Giants were the team that everyone expected them to be the landing spot for him. And after the dust kind of settled, it was kind of like, you know what, that's not a terrible place for him to land. He's got an opportunity. He's going to get plenty of run. He's motivated with that new contract, and he's not going to be like the only guy like in Carolina that like you had mentioned, in Carolina, he was only him. Brown did not do anything until like the very end of the season. And by then it was too late for Carolina. So they easily moved on. So totally agree with the 2 calls at the defensive end. Moving to linebacker, we have 3 linebackers, and all 3 are representing 3 different teams from the NFC East. So who are your linebackers here?
Yeah, we got some great linebacker options, the NFC East. My first one, and this is just straight ageism. This is all this is Bobby Okereke over Bobby Wagner. So Okereke is just quite a bit younger and has 130 plus combined tackles each of the last 3 seasons. 149 last year in his first year with the Giants. He's the man in the middle. He cleans everything up. I expect that position to be productive like it's always been since the Blake Martinez days.
Yeah, and he's too busy playing Pokemon cards now to be playing linebacker, but totally agree.
Right.
And like we mentioned too, we've already talked about Dexter Lawrence having a great season. We've already kind of mentioned Burns and Thibodeau, like Okereke or Okereke, whatever his name is, whatever podcast you listen to, he's going to be very clean. He's not going to have to take on, those blockers in that second level. He's going to be really clean just to wreak havoc and get tackles and sacks and all the things that he can do. So love that call. And from a 1 year perspective, it's not ageism at all. He's probably going to have a legit chance to be the LB1 this season, and give Oluwakan a little bit of a race there to be the overall LB1 by the end of the season.
Yeah, definitely. And LB2, I would have to go Wagner. I mean, he is one of the GOATs, no argument needed. But he's just getting old. This will be his 13th season in the league. That's a long time. But this blew my mind. He's crossed 100 combined tackles in every single of his 12 seasons in the league. So if consistency were a person, it would be Bobby Wagner.
I love Bobby Wagner. I have as many shares of him as I can. I still think he's going to easily put up LB1 numbers. Is there any hesitation with Luvu eating too many of his snaps, or is Wagner just so much of a professional that he's always going to put himself in the right position? He can probably diagnose plays better than a lot of offensive players can. Like you said, he's a GOAT for a reason. You don't get 12 seasons of 100 tackles by accident. Like, he's doing the work, so as a Bobby Wagner truther, I just was worried about Luvu taking too many of his snaps and cannibalizing him, but it doesn't seem like you're too worried or concerned about that.
No, I'm not worried about that. Even with God almighty. You could tell how this is the first podcast of the year. Davis, what's his name? Linebacker, Commanders.
Oh, Jamin Davis?
Thank you. Jamin Davis, right. So even Jamin Davis, who was supposed to be this next heir apparent, never really got past 80% of snaps. I don't even know if Lou was going to get to that. I feel like this could be more of like what he was doing at the tail end in Carolina with like pass rush and trying to get sacks and stuff. That's maybe where his value is at Louvu as like an IDP flex that every other week or once every 3 weeks has like a sack or a sack strip fumble or something and helps you win your week, but is not very consistent. I just don't think there's going to be enough to go around for him playing time wise and just opportunities. Wagner should eat all that up. I'm hoping anyway. Who knows? Yep. It's June.
Right. Right. All right. Well, bring us to our linebacker 3. New faces and new places. Who do you got here for as our linebacker 3?
Yeah, total. I mean, not a shot in the dark, but could go south. But I have been loading up on Eric Kendricks coming over to Dallas. He's coming off a rough season with injury issues. But assuming he can stay healthy, he's walking into that LVE type role right there. And we know how productive and talented he is. He had 117 combined tackles, missing almost 3 games last season, and averages well over 100 combined tackles a season for his career. And just some of those years in Minnesota where like you'd see his box scores at the end of the game and it's like 10 combined tackles, a pass defense, an interception, like a sack. Like he's a guy that can stuff the stat sheet. And Dallas doesn't really have anyone like that that's just going to run around and make plays. Assuming Parsons is doing what he's supposed to be doing in pass rushing, I would hope. It's Kendricks. Kendricks will be that guy.
Who's the linebacker 2 on Dallas? Is it Marquise Bell, who's even a hybrid safety, or like how do you see that shaking out?
Yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I would think Bell to start the season. I've seen some people talking about what was it, Liafu? I don't know if I buy that immediately. I wouldn't.
Clark?
Yeah, maybe Damone Clark. I wouldn't guess it's going to be much of a role like to start with. But yeah, in deeper leagues, it might be something we need to look at.
Yeah, but Kendricks is you're looking at probably 95, 100% of snaps from Kendricks. Like he's out there.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And if you're getting that kind of floor out of your LB3, I think you could do much worse. And here again, like we mentioned, the AFC East with their linebackers, we got to the number 2, number 3. It was kind of but I think these are 3 very solid choices. Definitely, Mike Wooler, green dot kind of guys, they're not coming off the field. They're definitely going to be, stuff in the stat sheets week in and week out for sure. All right. Cornerbacks. Who do you have in the NFC East?
Yeah, there could be a few guys here. Very, very loaded division. I mean, I love guys on each of these teams in the NFC East here. I do like DaRon Bland. So we don't know where Gilmore's landed yet. I mean, I guess there's a chance he re-signs with Dallas. It's not looking likely at this moment, though, from what I've read. So it looks like it's going to be DaRon Bland and Trayvon Diggs. We know people are not going to throw at Trayvon Diggs. We saw what happened with that scenario last year when people weren't throwing at Stephon Gilmore and DaRon Bland set the pick 6 record, right? So DaRon Bland is the right mix of good enough to make plays and score IDP points, but not so good that you're scared of him, where people are a little scared of Trayvon. So I love DaRon Bland is my CB1 this year. That's assuming that Gilmore does not come back to Dallas or that they don't sign someone between now and week 1.
I think it's a great call. And I think we go back to the sauce effect, where if Diggs is seen by opposing offensive coordinators as the guy to avoid, then you target the opposite corner, and Bland happens to be that guy, and he's very good in his own right, but not as good or perceived to be as good as Trayvon Diggs is. So definitely an easy call there. What about cornerback 2?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of good options here. Could have been St. Juice, but I'm going to go Darius Slay just because of the consistent production throughout his entire career. So he'll give you a good 55 plus combined tackles and double-digit pass defenses as a floor year in and year out. and has been known to land many a splash play over the years. So I love Darius. It's going to be a little weird with the Eagles secondary. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a minute. But Darius is just, if you're going to, in a vacuum, take a shot in the dark on a corner, that's a great shot in the dark.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing we kind of have come back to a couple of times here is it's the consistency with these players. There's some players that have done it 1 year, 2 years, but there are some players that have done it throughout their body of their whole career. And Slay is one of those players that just has been consistent as they've come. And I don't think it's easy to replicate that. So he's definitely a safe call there at the second spot. Right. All right. And you did mention, the Eagles secondary, and that's something we're definitely going to get into here in just a moment. Maybe right now, as we talk about the safeties. So, Johny, who do you have as the safety one for the NFC East?
Total guesses here. That not very strong safety wise. Like neither of Dallas's safeties are great. New York's got a rookie, and I couldn't even tell you who the other starting safety is right now. Washington brought in Chin. A lot of weird stuff going on, but I'm going to say Reed Blankenship. This is just based off, 113 combined tackles last year, which is linebacker numbers at a safety. That's awesome. He's got a 73.4 PFF. That's not spectacular, but it's also better than a lot of other guys in that secondary there. So I think he retains his job or a starting job. But yeah, we've got Cooper DeJean, we've got Mitchell, we've got Bradbury, we've got Slay, we've got Sidney Brown. Too many chefs in the kitchen. So someone is not going to do well here. I just think Reed Blankenship's safe and massively productive guy last year. Plus, the linebackers are still essentially garbage. So it's going to be those safeties helping to clean up a lot of plays. So I'm going to go Reed Blankenship.
Yeah, he definitely was a revelation last year. I really had a lot of shares of Sidney Brown, hoping that he was going to be the guy, and he looks the part. It's just that unfortunate injury after he had a couple nice weeks and then got hurt. So, and again, that happened late in the season. So we're looking at, his timetable being pushed back. So, Blankenship has that body of work. He's got the stats, so he's probably going to get the run there to start at least. So kind of see what happens with him. You kind of already mentioned our safety 2, and this, like you said, a new face and a new place. So sell me on Jeremy Chin.
Chin, over a chance of new life in Washington. And a lot of people are going to buy this. I don't know if I do. But if we can get the first 2 seasons Chin with 107 and 117 combined tackles, then, man, we're cooking with propane. If not, that's fine too. Safety is always plentiful on waivers. He's only got a 57.7 PFF, so this is not a lock by any means. But it's maybe not a terrible idea if you want to take a shot on Chin and hope we get the old Chin that we used to have.
Yeah, and last week, Evan Ringler and I were doing our keep trade cut, and Chin is actually going off the board as like the safety 3 right now, which is baffling to me that he's going that high. Just because of it must be that like people thinking that, hey, we're going to get that Jeremy Chin from season 1, season 2, and not the horrible Jeremy Chin that we saw a couple of seasons in Carolina. With Cameron Curl being gone out of Washington and now moving on to LA, I definitely think that he and or Derek Forrest can definitely be some solid options there late in your draft. So, all right, moving on to our last position, our IDP flex spot. And we've kind of teased out that the linebackers of the NFC East are really, really strong. And this could be an option here for your flex spot. So, Johny, who do you got for your IDP flex?
Okay, I think whoever ends up being the guy for Philly is going to be a great producer, whether that's Nakobe Dean or Devin White. We'll see. They're both not great in their own special ways. Devin White has a 46 PFF, so he stinks. And Nakobe Dean cannot stay healthy. But whichever one of those guys locks down that position, that's basically a full-time starter. Just guessing rate's the only problem.
And again, having that defensive line in front of them, there's a list of, potential all-stars who could probably be on this list, this year or next year on that Eagles front 7. And so, whoever wins the job, like you said, between Dean or White, definitely should be kept clean, able to wreak some havoc and rack up some stats. So, All right, like we did with the AFC, Johny, is there anything that, like, as you're kind of going through this exercise, looking at names and faces and places and things like that, that stood out to you as far as like maybe like a head scratchy moment, kind of like, I'm going to have to really do some research on this position or spot?
Yeah. So my original answer was the Eagles secondary is going to be tricky. We'll see how it shakes out because there are too many chefs in the kitchen, and not all of them are going to be productive or play enough to be productive. So we'll see. But after you told me about Chin being number 3 safety for ADP right now, that's the head scratcher right there. I just don't understand. I get it if you want to take another shot, but as the 3rd overall safety, like that's absolutely insane.
Yeah, it was one of those, like, as I was going through and I had to check multiple times to make sure I was looking at the things correctly. And, we were just looking at the ADP from best ball, and a lot of that was before the rookies were thrown in. So there's some of that like recency bias. We're like, oh, he's a hot name in the news. Jeremy Chin got, he's going to get an opportunity to do that. So could be some of that. So we'll kind of see how things shake out as we get closer to the season and once they get training camp started and things like that. So, all right. Well, now it's time, Johny, to kind of go through and cast our votes. Where are we gonna put our bucket down for who we picking? So at the defensive tackle position, again, for the AFC, we had Quinnen Williams and Zach Zeiler. And for the NFC, we had Jonathan Allen and Dexter Lawrence. Who are you thinking right now? Who would you rather have between those two duos?
Oh, yeah. I'd rather have the AFC guys. Quinnen for his ceiling and Sealer for his consistent tackle floor.
And I have to agree. As much as I love Dexter Lawrence this season, I don't think he has the floor that Williams has. That Jets defense is going to be scary good this year. And I think that Quinnen Williams will be the difference maker, the tone setter on that defensive unit. So I just think that he's going to have a great season this year. Looking at our defensive ends, we have for the AFC, we have Hassan Reddick and Matthew Judon. We did kind of make a case maybe for Jermaine Johnson there, but so we didn't want to cannibalize too much. So we're going to go with Matthew Judon and Hassan Reddick versus the duo of Micah Parsons and Brian Burns.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Parsons and Burns here. Parsons, I mean, even though his ceiling for the first 3 years has been like 13 and a half sacks, I know he's capable of a lot more than that. So the sky's the limit for him. And then Burns, I think, is going to really flourish now that he finally has some talent around him on that defensive line.
I'm in agreement there. So far we have 2 votes for the AFC, 2 votes for the NFC. Going to the linebacker position for the AFC, we had CJ Mosley and his running mate Quincy Williams, and then a combo line B3 of either Juwan Bentley or Jordan Brooks. We're going to land with Juwan Bentley there. So we've got Mosley, Williams, and Juwan Bentley going against the trio of Bobby Okereke, Bobby Wagner, and Eric Kendricks.
Oh, yeah. Slam dunk on this one. Wagner, Kendricks, Okereke. I mean, that's just spectacular.
Yeah. Yep. And all 3 of those guys have, for the NFC East, have potential of being LB1s. Kendricks is probably a little bit more of a long shot than that. But when you look at the AFC counterparts, I would much rather, if I had money to place down, that 2 of those 3 guys are going to be LB1s by the end of the season versus the AFC piece. So yeah, count me in on that. So moving on to the secondary, the cornerbacks, we have DJ Reed and Christian Gonzalez representing the AFC East. And we have Duron Bland and Darius Slay representing the NFC East.
Yeah, a lot of good options here. Love them all, but I'm going to go DJ Reed just because it's extremely productive, extremely consistent, and more so, I'm going to say Christian Gonzalez pushes this over the top for me because while I love Devin Witherspoon and I love Nate Hobbs and I think and Kenny Moore and those guys always have a good chance to be corner 1, Christian Gonzalez has just as good a chance to be overall IDP cornerback 1 by the end of this season.
And I totally agree. I'm with you with the AFC piece here too. The other part is the consistency and the ability to repeat or replicate last season. Duron Bland had an amazing season with all the pick sixes. That's going to be something that's, if he gets half of what he did last season, it'll be a great season. Just because it's such a unpredictable stat and an unpredictable play. to get a sack or a pick, and in Bland's case, a pick six. So I just don't see how he can replicate that outstanding season that he had. And sadly for him, if he doesn't replicate it, it's going to be seen as a down season, but there's a reason it was an NFL record-setting season for him. So
yeah, and we see that all the time in IDP cornerback. Trayvon, after his 11-pick season, dropped down to like 4 or something. Xavier Howard, after his 10-pick season, dropped off the face of the planet. Doesn't even play football anymore. So, things happen, especially at corner. Wildly, crazy position.
And that's not even talking about the off-the-field stuff, like all the Xavier Howard stuff. So we won't even get into that part of the playing football. So at our safety position, we have Reed Blanket. For the AFC Police, we have Javon Holland and Kyle Duggar representing the AFC East. And on the NFC side, we have Reed Blankenship and Jeremy Chin. Who you casting your vote with?
Oh, definitely the AFC side. Duggar's set in stone. We know he's going to play almost every snap, if not every snap, and be massively productive. And we know the same thing with Holland. Chin may or may not be the starter, or maybe the starter for a few weeks. And, the 47-7 PFF grade lands him back on the bench. And then the Eagles, I love Blankenship, but, we've talked about this. There's a lot of guys there. Someone's going to lose out. So definitely AFC for this one.
Yep. I think the repeatability of the position is going to be much more realistic for players like Holland to replicate, because there really isn't any competition for him there. And Duggar is, like you said, a cornerstone on that defense. Whereas you look at the NFC counterparts, there's a lot of question marks with playing time in the secondary for the Eagles, and just question marks around Chin. Is what player is he? Is he the player from year 1, year 2? Is he the player from year 3, 4? Is he somewhere in the middle? So just too many question marks there. All right. So that brings us with a score of 8-4. The AFC East takes the win in our second IDP Battle Royale for 2024. The AFC East the AFC has now won the last 2 Battle Royales, taking the NFC North, beating the NFC North last time, and now beating the NFC East this time. So the AFC has got a stacked defensive unit for sure. Johny, any final thoughts as you kind of put a ribbon on this episode?
Nothing really. I mean, I love this idea. This is a great idea for a series, kind of pitting these against each other. And it helps you see the 30,000-foot view on all this stuff, right? Like it does make sense when you look at it, because it's like every year in the playoff race, or recently at least, it's all these stacked AFC teams that all have a legit Super Bowl shot, and then whatever random NFC team makes it out into the Super Bowl. That's how it's been lately. It's like the Niners and a bunch of crap, and then the AFC is just loaded to the gills, and that is so clear when we look at that here, when we look at the talent here.
And not only the talented defenses, but the talented defensive positions, like the key positions. We talked last time when Aaron and I did the AFC and NFC North, we looked at the defensive lines, and it's just like you're looking at the defensive ends of Myles Garrett and TJ Watt, both playing in the same division, and they're legit.
And Crosby's in the AFC too.
Yeah. And they're legit like 1, 2, 3 in drafts right now. And you're in one division. So it is truly, a dog eat dog, where whoever can make it out of the AFC East or the AFC is the favorite to win the Super Bowl just because of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So last question for you. Looking ahead to doing this episode again next year at this time, are there any rookies that were drafted this year that could see their names in this episode that could be making a splash, could be making a name for themselves? So what do you got?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit before we kicked off. Cooper DeJean, sure, definitely a possibility. I just don't know if we're going to see it right away, because there may not be enough playing time right away. I don't know. We'll see. But Nubin, certainly, because, opportunity is more than half the battle with IDP. You need the opportunity to score the points. Nubin's going to have the opportunity, I would think, right out the gate at 100% of snaps for the entire season. And then same thing with Cole Bishop, too. Those guys are both pretty much locked and loaded as starting safeties, I would think. So that gives them the opportunity to be on this list next year if they're productive and talented.
Yeah, and that was something that we kind of took away from last time we did with Aaron. We talked about just how this defensive class didn't seem as filled with studs as previous draft classes. We had obviously the 3 big pass rushers. The linebackers were a couple of names, maybe. The secondary is probably the biggest piece with, the corners, and obviously the safeties are probably there. And, and you just reiterated that with the names that you mentioned. It was Newbin and Bishop and DeJean. Those are those secondary pieces. So definitely kind of on point with what we were thinking too. So, all right. Well, all right, listeners and viewers, that will do it for this week's episode. What do you think? Did we get the players correct? Or did we get the synopsis of our players correct? Or the points fell the right way? We'd love to hear from you. Comment down below or over on the Twitter machine. Be sure to hit us up with your thoughts. It's always nice to hear some differing opinions. That'll do it for this episode of the IDP After Show. Join me next time as I'm joined by Mr. Eric Harms as we dive into some buy, sell, and trade candidates at the defensive line position. To be sure you don't miss that or any other episode of the IDP Show or the IDP After Show, make sure you follow, like, subscribe, and hit that notification button. For Johny and myself, we thank you for taking time to listen in, and we'll catch up with you next time.
This was the IDP After Show.